All right, you may begin.
Thank you. Welcome to the January 10th, 2023, it's hard saying 2023, meeting of CB6 Bylaws Committee. I want to take a moment, though, to wish everyone a happy and healthy and joyous new year. My name is B. Disman, and I am the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. As a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members to have their camera on and their first and last name displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A function of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We need to have a minute taker for tonight. Is anyone volunteering to take a minute? Jesus, I can't see if there's any hands up.
This is Seema. I'm happy to take minutes.
Thank you, Seema. Much appreciated. We will now take attendance by roll call. Jesus will conduct the roll call.
All right. Can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. B. Disman.
Present.
Thank you. Adam Hartke.
Present.
Thank you. Seema Shah.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra Sherrod.
Present.
Thank you. Maura Wong.
Present.
Thank you. And Mark Thompson could not be with us tonight. 5 out of 6 members present. We have a quorum.
Great. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. If there's no objection, we'll adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom.
I don't see any hands.
Okay,
Item.
the minutes are, any hands?
No, I see none.
Okay, the minutes are adopted. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, the agenda is adopted. The minutes from the November 2nd committee meeting were distributed ahead of time. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting these minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom.
I see nothing.
Okay, seeing no objection, the minutes from November 2nd committee meeting are adopted and will soon be available on CB6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that are already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'm going to ask Jesus and Sandra to help me because I can't see everyone, will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you could speak. Committee members are required by state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during the entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you step away from your computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. The order of business as adopted is as follows. We're first going to review the bylaws that for further discussion. We have a number of items in park, and in addition to items in park, a number of committee members have given us items to consider. And since we're not finished with the bylaws, I told them to send it to us. So I'd like to go to that part of the meeting today and deal with unfinished business from our last meeting, some new items, and then the things we had in park that we have to resolve. It's my hope that we can finish all of this today. So one of the first items from our last meeting was the language minutes, okay? And I indicated at our last meeting that I would write some language and circulate it to everyone, which I did just before the meeting. So my proposal on minutes, this is based on our discussion, is minutes of the various CB6 committees will be in a format prescribed by the executive committee. A template will be provided. This reflects the discussion that we had. I don't know if anyone on the committee has any comments.
I just think that that works out quite well.
Okay. Raise your hand if you have any objections. Okay, then we will add this to the section that deals with board meetings. I'm sorry, board committees, which is section 8. So Jesus, if we could put it in section 8.
Sorry, B, when did you send it? I'm just trying to look for the language to add
I
to
sent
them.
it this afternoon.
Okay,
As a matter of fact, it should have gone to you at 1:42.
all right, I will take a look, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Jesus to hold this item and we will place it in the appropriate section. In talking to Jesus about our last meeting, we realized that we will have a transition year from the time that people will take office to the time of the election, because normally they take office following November and December, and we agreed that people would take office in January. So I asked Jesus to come up with language that when we move to the new term starting January, we will have a transition that people that are offices and will be in existence until that new committee. I don't know, Jesus, if you come up with language.
I did not. I'm sorry. I must have missed that it was up to me to get to come up with that.
Okay.
But we
So,
can.
okay, so I will again come up with language and work with Jesus, but we need a transition of 2 months, and we'll put that in the appropriate section. Okay, then certain things have come up in addition to the note that I got from Stuart Desser. The next item involves the appointment of CB6 members to committees. You know, it always has been the practice of generally passed of the community board for the chair to speak to committee heads about potential members or issues with members. It's generally been our practice, but it is not a formal practice that's in the minutes. A suggestion was made that we formalize that and that we should really say that the appointment of CB6 members to committees should, the chair should consult with the committee chairs in making such assignment. Anyone have any comments or thoughts about it?
Sorry, B,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, how would the mechanics of that work? Would it just, I guess, the letter of the law, would it be that the chair would have to just talk to the committee chair and that's it, and then that chair could then theoretically do whatever they want, just as long as they?
No, it's really it's the chair of the board that assigns members to committees, but
Right.
it should have, he or she should have the consultation with the committee chair themselves as to membership. It might be the committee chair might want some people removed from the committee for whatever reasons, some substitutes. This has been a general practice itself, so that there'd be no surprises.
Sure, but
yeah, go ahead.
But I mean, like, but the actual, like, the mechanics of it, like, if we were doing and trying this, basically the chair of the board would just talk to the chair of the committee, and then therefore they, as long as they do that, that's fine, and they could completely do whatever they want after that, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing that sanctions it in any way. I just
Yeah.
think it's good business. I mean, it's
Okay.
logical business. I'm gonna ask Sandra, since he was chair of the committee, I may assume that you did such discussions.
Yeah. I think I see Marty's on as an attendee as well. I'm sure that most chairs over the years, including the current one, have consulted with chairs of committees prior to me making a final determination. I know that sometimes that you have to remove someone from a committee for a variety of reasons, whether it's not working with them, particularly on the committee, or because the committee has too many people, or you just need to rebalance the entire board a little bit as new people come on and people have been on for some period of time. So it's not always a welcome move, and I think all of us have had that unpleasant conversation where we had to remove someone for a variety of reasons. But I do think, in consultation with the chair of a committee is completely appropriate and not really binding in any way, forcing a hand of the chair of the board. So I would be 100% in support of that language.
Anyone else have any other comments? I mean, I think it is very logical. Okay, we'll find the appropriate place to put that. Then another question came up, when we were dealing with terms of the offices. So we spent a lot of time considering how long, the terms should exist. But we didn't have a discussion about terms of committee chairs, okay? And that has always been a little discussion at the board. We've had some chairs that have been there for many years. We've had chairs been there for a short period of time. So I throw the question out to the committee. Should there be the terms of committee chairs? For example, the chair of the board can have a maximum of 3 years, okay? Should a chair of a committee have the same maximum? If we are looking at succession planning and we want people that are new to the board to aspire to this, the question is, what do you do with the chairs? And I throw that out to you because when I was reading it, we were very careful about chairs of the officers, but we really didn't have a discussion about chairs of committee members, of committees. Any thoughts?
I have a thought if no one else does it, but
Go ahead, Sandra.
we do have some language in here for C. I don't know if Jesus, should I be sharing or Jesus, are you sharing? I'm not sure who was sharing.
Jesus,
before.
could you share this with us?
If you want to. So we have 4C states a chair of a standing committee shall serve only during the term or terms of the board chair appointing or reappointing them. And then the second line says a standing committee chair may be reappointed by board chair provided that no member may serve as chair of a standing committee for more than 5 years or 5 consecutive one-year terms, excuse me. And I particularly remember that one because I think I was the very first person who stepped down after 5 years voluntarily, before we did have chairs that were on for like 15 years. But do you,
So
in
Sandra,
addition to this,
why should it be 5 years?
I don't know that it should be 5 years, but I think we didn't have a term limit prior to this, and this was the first enacting of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I go to the question, I raise it as to whether I've heard the discussion about the 5 years. I know in certain places there's expertise that's required. Sometimes you don't have people stepping up. So the question I have, should it be 3 years or should we leave it as it is? What are people's thoughts?
I'm happy to jump in. I'm fine with leaving it as it is. I think the 5 years I think is fair. And also too, my understanding is the chairs themselves serve at the pleasure of the chair of the board, right? So therefore that person could, as long as they're within that 5 year envelope, make a change.
Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, this is Seema. I agree. Only for like, if there's, I would prefer to have continuity among the chairs, among the committees, even if the chair changes, the board chair changes. So yeah, especially if there's, a lot of projects are multi-year and things like that. So if something starts year 3, I don't want it to just necessarily go away right away. So.
Good point.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's not worth considering 6 years instead of 5, since the board chair is 3 years. If we want even more continuity, then that would allow the committee chairs to work continuously with 2 different board chairs. With 5, you'd potentially have to change things midstream.
Anyone have any thoughts about 5 versus 6?
This is Seema. I personally don't feel strongly about it, one way or the other, meaning I'm fine with 5, but I'm also fine with 6. I don't know if that makes such a huge difference personally.
Anyone else have thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent. I feel like it's been rare that there have been wholesale committee chair changes with a new board chair. Normally it's just 2 or 3 based on, changing needs and priorities and personal commitment availability sort of thing. So I don't think it matters one way or the other. Honestly, Moira, if you feel better about like 6 and 5, I'm perfectly fine with that as well.
No, I just wanted to bring it up, just ask the
Yeah.
question. I see that Marty actually wrote in the chat that it had been unlimited before, but as chair, he actually made it 5 years when he was the chair of this committee.
Yeah, I think that
That's
goes
accurate, or at least it wasn't. So yeah, I maybe he did, but it wasn't held after he was chair, because I know we had a land use chair for like 12 years after he was chair. So
All right, so not to have a debate on the length of a chair, why don't we leave it as is, so that that won't be one of the new changes that we bring, okay? Okay, I would like to go to the note that Stuart Dessa sent, which I also sent to all of you. And I think he was dealing with the issues of resolutions and votes on resolutions, and whether we're voting on concept. I could break it down into 2 areas. He's written a lot of language, but one is about having resolutions distributed prior to the meeting so that people get a chance to see the resolution. And I think we do attempt to do this by most of the members. And his suggestion was the bylaws should mandate that whenever a resolution has been drafted in advance of a meeting, it is distributed before the meeting to those eligible to vote. I would, from what I've seen at the board for these years, that has been the practice. The only time that we get involved with last minute that I've seen is when we have something time sensitive that has come up,
right.
or a committee has met on a Monday and our board meeting is on Wednesday, and that is time sensitive. So I actually think that we're doing this. Can I have a sense of the board, of the committee members, as to whether you feel we're not following this procedure?
I'll raise my hand if no one else wants. I think the board office has been very good, and the committees have been very good about putting together draft resolutions that we can react to and intelligently respond to. There are always changes, like during the meeting, we'll decide perhaps that a liquor license appeal or request has changing or needs stronger language. So that, has to be done in terms of a way to make it consistent and also kind of standardized. So having that redrafted in front of a meeting is always been a little tricky, but I do think we've always tried to provide as clear and as concise language that is appropriate verbally if we're making any changes to any written documents. And I can't really recall at any point in time where there was a drafted resolution that was somehow not presented as part of the package, because, you know, just as part of our general process, a committee is supposed to draft and debate and then present as a committee to the entire body for ratification or review. So it's unable to do that if it doesn't have a document to actually proffer forward. So I'm not really sure if there was a specific instance that I've missed or if there's something that Stu is referring to in particular, but I absolutely think it's a good idea. And in fact, I hope that's what everyone's been doing.
Anyone else have any comments? Jesus, has that not been your standard practice?
Whenever the office is given a resolution ahead of time, we send it along to either the committee, if it's still at the committee stage. As far as full board, something we've been doing for a good year, maybe so now, whenever a resolution is ready for full board, we put it up on the Reso tracker, pre-decisional with lots of watermarks to make it very clear it is a draft, rather than having to do what we did before. Everyone would wait until the day of or the day before to get all the resolutions at once. For those committees that happen to have them already done, we put them right up. Hopefully the board members are frequently consulting the Reso tracker to review those resolutions. But yeah, that's whenever, if we can only send them out as soon as we get them. If there are delays at the committee level, you know, the office can't really do much about that. I too would be curious about what specific incidents may have prompted these suggestions, because it could be that maybe there's a simple procedural fix or something that will help.
I do see that he's in the attendance of this meeting. Maybe, Madam Chair, if we can ask him.
Yeah, it would be wonderful, since I can't see that, it would be great if we could give Stuart the floor. There's a second part to his thing that he also had, and I've actually seen this presented at some committee meetings, which is the question that we shouldn't vote on concepts, but only on the actual language. So I have seen that happen where an issue has come up and we, at a committee meeting, haven't had the opportunity to draft a resolution. So we vote on the concept to move it forward, but before the board meeting, a resolution is circulated to the committee meetings. And they're generally, when we were meeting in person, that was generally an opportunity to meet on that resolution and see if anyone had any change. I do think with Zoom that we have not been doing that type of situation. But if Stuart would like the floor to explain, has he seen something specific that we should be putting some procedural things in? Because that has generally been standard practice.
Yeah, I wrote that actually because that's exactly what happened at one committee I was in. I obviously don't know how much in advance the language was written, but the resolution was presented on screen at the meeting, so it was obviously written sometime before the meeting began. And I would propose that if that is generally the practice, and I think it generally is, it would still be wise to put it in the rules, and it's there. I think it does no harm if that's generally the practice, and it would be beneficial for those rare moments when it's not. So that would be my.
B made an interesting point, and just kind of to add to what Stu just mentioned. I think when we met in person, sometimes we would have, prior to the board meeting, a committee meeting, a brief committee meeting, so that we can kind of discuss things and make sure that we were all in agreement of finalized language that maybe wasn't finalized at the committee level when they originally met. we used to often take that session between the initial public part of the meeting and then the business section of the meeting to also regroup if there was some fine tuning, or in many cases we've had maybe additional information that came to light literally in the final minutes or hours before we were going to vote, because they knew that that item was on the agenda, and a resident of the community or a business owner or whatever would come and provide additional information, because sometimes we had provided a resolution based on the discussion at committee, but then there was additional, they would agree to different hours, or someone would provide us a map or something that actually led a little bit more detail in our actual discussion and debate during the vote. So that's interesting.
Yeah, because I actually seen what Stuart spoke about at one meeting, where the issue that he's talking about, the concept, and language was, the resolution had not been written yet.
Yeah.
But I do think the concept that we all tried to do, and we did for years, that the in-person meetings allowed us to reconcile this type of situation. I think you have the concept discussions if it's really time sensitive. And we've had over the years, a couple of time sensitive situations. So what's the feeling of the committee? Because we could put under the meeting procedures 2 sentences about everything in advance, and we should avoid voting on concepts. I mean, it's easy to put something in there, as that's been our practice.
Mara requests the floor.
I'm sorry?
Maura requests the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, I had 2 things. I agree that it is our general common practice to see the resolutions before meetings, and I support formalizing this, as you suggest, be with 1 or 2 sentences. Something that Stuart said, though, leads me to a question of clarification. Are we talking about sharing the resolutions in written form before just the full board meetings, or are we also talking about providing something to committee members in committee meetings ahead of time as well?
So if I could comment on it more. So as I've seen it over the years, it's been for the board meetings, there's no question that we should really be providing the resolution ahead of time, unless it's something that came up, very time sensitive, that just came up, that we need to just deal with concepts. Haven't dealt with a lot of concepts at board meetings. But when at the committee meetings, sometimes something just pops, okay? Yeah. And it becomes that we're asked by a council person or an assembly person to support something, that something's coming up for a vote, and it pops. And so we discuss in general the concept and do not see the resolution. We assign it to someone to write the resolution, but then that resolution should be circulated, and that's been the missing part. It should actually be circulated to committee members to see if there are any problems before it goes into the package. And I think that has not happened now with Zoom. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but I think us going into this environment has been a little different. Can any other committee members comment on that?
Sandra requests the floor.
Sandra?
Yeah, sorry. I think that's absolutely right. Prior to Zoom, I remember years ago, many furious moments where we would table something that was under debate until later in the meeting, when myself or someone else could write out, actually a draft of a whereas or a resolve statement that we thought was more appropriate based on change that occurred from the debate that was on the floor, and then we would return to that. And maybe that's just not been the case more recently. And I don't know if that's because of the more structured approach of our meetings with or without Zoom. I'm not sure, why that is, but I do think maybe a return to having solidified the language before we actually vote makes a lot of sense, right? It doesn't really make sense for us to say, we're in favor, we'll figure out what we mean later. That I don't think makes a lot of sense.
So then if no one objects,
Stu,
why don't, yeah, I'm sorry, is there another hand up? Because I can't see.
yes, Stuart Desser requests the floor.
Stuart?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, and I don't know the answer, that we want to be careful not to violate the open meetings law. I think it's okay to distribute language as long as it's not voted on outside of an official proceeding.
In addition to that, though, I think it's also the intent is not just the vote to be open, but the actual discussion and thought behind it. So there is always, it's fine to have some draft language, but to have a complete debate about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate goes into the against open meetings law.
Right, but I think that you have the conflict taking place of the open meetings law and the fact that we're not meeting in person to have that formal discussion, okay? So why don't we try,
Seema has her hand up.
Seema, go ahead.
Well, I obviously in principle agree with all of this. I'm just, there have been, again, when I was like, in the in-person realities, we did have things like this kind of come up at the last minute. So I'm still not sure how we're resolving that, because there were time sensitive things. There was, like something had happened in a homeless shelter the day before. We wanted to, make sure that the full committee had heard about it and supported something. Like, I just don't want us to miss out on opportunities to comment on pressing matters of our district if we're not keeping it somewhat flexible. Are we getting at that in the language?
So I think we can do that. I just wrote a note to myself because I think there could always be exceptions with the time sensitive issues that come up. But in part of this, and that could really be some of the things that we actually say. And I see, because I can't see what's on the screen. So someone is actually going to the section.
Excuse me,
Where
are you
where are you?
I'm in section 5, executive committee. Section 4, terms of office.
No, go down.
There's a board committees section.
There's a board committee meeting. There's a board meeting procedures.
Section 8, board committees and board meeting.
And section 7 is board meeting procedures.
All right, I'm there now. Would you like me to note something here?
Yeah, so would you note 3 things? The concept that we're going to put in, and I'll work with language again.
Wait, I'm sorry, B, you're not asking us to vote on approving a concept without final language about.
No, I am
on a
just
concept
doing I am doing
without
a
final
park.
language.
I am doing a park. I'm going to do exactly what I did with the last meeting. I said I would write. I know. I said I would write, but it's a good tease because it's exactly the thing.
Yeah.
So I would like to incorporate 3 of the things that
this is a really good example though, right? Because what we're saying is we think we all agree on something in concept and we want it to be memorialized. However, we don't want to stop the meeting and go figure that out. We want to just continue with the agenda. So it's kind of an interesting case study there.
Right, and since we know we're going to be meeting next month to go over
We have
the
that
final
luxury
items,
of putting it off. Yep.
that's the item where I could share the same way I shared the minutes discussion of what to put in. And I will also share something about the transition. So we know what we're voting on, and language does make a difference, Sandra. So I do agree with that, because I also agree with Seema. You don't want to tie our hands if something time sensitive comes up.
Yeah.
So
I agree
think-
100% as well.
Yeah, so I think we should just Jesus mark in this section that draft resolutions need to be distributed in advance. Okay, that's the concept. That we don't vote on concepts, but actual language. And that we will make exceptions for items that are time sensitive. If you could get that those 3 concepts, I think that incorporates what Stuart had recommended, and we saw it as we worked through it today itself. And I think it is really has been the issue of Zoom and electronic meetings versus in person meetings.
Right.
Anyone have any other additions? Those are the three concepts that I picked up.
So I will include a note in section 7, board meeting procedures.
Right.
To include that a draft resolution would need to be distributed in advance, that we do not vote on concepts, just language, and that we will make exceptions for time-sensitive matters.
Right. And I will give you greater language. I'm giving myself a job to give you language on a number of things. Stuart, thank you for recommending this.
Thank you for considering it.
Okay. So I want to go, and I think it's helpful as people experience things, and we're going over the bylaws. It is very helpful to have people cite examples or things that they've seen for us to deal with, okay? So I want to go back to things that we parked, okay? And have a discussion on each of those items to see if we could finish all the parked items from before. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is want to go to section 2, board offices, okay? And in section 2, board offices, we deal with the question of the that if you're a board officer, okay, you cannot be chair of a standing committee. That is what the bylaws say right now, okay? Questions and suggestions have been made that emergencies come up, that a board officer may have the expertise that needs to, and questions have come up, and we parked it the last time, as to whether or not we should permit board officers to chair standing committees. So for example, if a vice chair has particular expertise, in addition to being vice chair, can that vice chair also be chair of a standing committee? Now, when you do something like that, you do not grow community board members, and you keep it to a limited number of people. And you also reduce the number of people on the executive committee. So I want to throw that we had started a discussion on that. We decided to park it. I don't know how people feel about this. I've been thinking about it, but I'd like to hear about from the board, from the committee members. Adam, you've been quiet. What's your thoughts?
I really don't have any thoughts. I'm fine keeping it sort of like a separation of powers, if you will. So that, I mean, that's my 2 cents, truthfully.
Okay. Seema, any thoughts?
Not sure. Yeah. I guess I would always like distribute leadership opportunities among more board members than less in general. So I guess, yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, Maura?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's better to keep it separate.
Okay, and
Executive,
Sandra?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was added exactly for those reasons stated. Make sure that more people have an opportunity to be part of the leadership team, as well as grow and not have like a core 2 or 3 people that are doing everything, because it's a board. It's not it's not a executive. It's not a position where we don't take each other's concerns and the community at heart. So I absolutely agree that we should have more people than less.
Okay. All right, so we're going to leave it as is. Okay. Then I just want to go to the next thing that we said we need to change. Okay. And substitute language is also in 2, and it's O, and it's to serve as a signature. This is under the duties. I guess it's the duties of the treasurer to serve as signatory. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's the duties of the chair to serve as signatory on the board's imprest funds. We said we would change the term imprest funds to financial accounts. So we just need to change the language on that. And that was the comment we had, to serve as a signatory on any board financial accounts as needed. So
Mhm.
we're changing that language if no one has any objections.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
then I want to get to the vice chairs. Okay. And we had indicated on the vice chairs that the vice chairs should serve as a mentoring. We gave them the role of mentoring, okay? But we really didn't define what we meant by mentoring, okay? So should the vice chairs create a mentoring program and deliver it? What do we really mean? We have to do a mentoring program. We've had it at various times. Can you give me more thoughts about mentoring programs itself? Because I think we have to do a little more definition in dealing with the vice chairs. Okay, Sandra, what would you think about as a mentoring program?
Well, we had a vice chair that served for a while, that was a former educator, and I think we were spoiled because at that point, when he was serving as vice chair, he did run a very well organized mentoring program that got people through the initial confusion, frustrations of joining a community board and not understanding, all the acronyms and not understanding the process. I have absolutely, as the current person who's serving in a vice chair role again, which, by the way, I'm doing so because we have not had other people, newer
That's right.
members join, not because I am so desiring to be a vice chair again. So I would highly encourage Moira and others to consider, further leadership positions in the board. I would be happy to conduct a mentoring session with new board members if that is in any way beneficial. The only challenge is, we're meeting via Zoom. It's a very different environment, so I'm not sure how well some of those might or might not be pulled off. But I do think it makes sense to try to encourage a vice chair or vice chairs to help organize and coordinate and execute a mentoring program, not necessarily relegate one of the vice chairs to be the mentor, but maybe help to organize it. I think the board office had a very good role working with Claude in organizing. People met at the temporary board office or the permanent board office as well through that. So I think it's a complicated, but it's a very good idea. The execution might be a little tricky.
All right, so Sandra used words like develop, organize, and implement, okay? A
Mhm.
mentoring program. We could use that as more definition. And we could also do that with the board office because they have a lot of materials.
Yeah.
So I think if we could put language there that it does some of the adjectives and verbs that you've spoken about, Sandro, it would help. Let me
Okay.
ask Maura, as a new member who has risen to leadership and actually got to know a lot of the stuff through the bylaws discussions. Maura, what's your thought about mentoring?
I actually raised my hand before you asked because I wanted to mention that it sounded as though our current board chair had actually done some of this on his own initiative this year for the new board members, not my cohort. So it sounds like there is actually movement on the board to make this kind of thing happen, but it's happening at the board or the chair level, not the vice chair level. So I don't know if this is something we should bring him in to discuss with us. But I do remember one of our first meetings where this came up, and I agree that yes, as a newbie, it was intimidating to some degree because there was no level of explanation. I was just sort of thrown in. So yes, I do think that this would be useful for anyone moving into either the committee or having any aspirations for leadership. I don't think people have any clear idea of how they would even go about doing that at this point.
Thank you, Maura. So Jesus, could you talk about what Carl did with mentoring this year?
Just
Did I-
froze for a second. I don't know if he can hear us.
All right, I may have froze for a little bit. I'm sorry if someone was addressing me. I didn't.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, we were talking about mentoring, and Maura mentioned that Carl had done mentoring for the new members of the board. And I was going to ask, what type of mentoring was it a formal program? Was it a session? And are we taking some of his responsibility or authority away if we talk about the vice chairs developing it? It could always be in consultation with the chair. So I thought it would be helpful if you could explain what was done this year.
Yes, we're trying to make it formal, sort of like have units that can be reproduced year after year. There was a unit on resolution writing that allowed the new cohort from this year to try their hand at writing a resolution. In fact, the resolution that was passed a few months ago on holidays actually came out of that. There was a unit on the structure of a meeting, from call to order to adjournment and the various sections in between, so that they can become familiar with that. There was a unit on how to write minutes. In fact, the shorter, we think, more efficient template that is on the website now for people to use, and that people have been using, came out of that. The office did some research on things that the Freedom of Information Law, for example, because that does have an impact on minutes. So we had adapted it in that way, in ways that we didn't know of before. So yeah, there were all of it was done on Zoom. And while I have seen some boards do similar things, and they do them on video where they record the videos and then they just kind of keep them in perpetuity and you just watch them. I think for some even something like a minutes training can lend itself to that. But there can also be opportunities for, even through Zoom, we saw that session after session after session, this new cohort sort of opened up a lot and came out of their shell a lot, because they had an opportunity to talk about some of these things that they were going to be seeing in their meetings, and to get to know each other. So it really did seem to be successful. There are, of course, things that need to be retooled. This helps with this. But the reason we did it is we kind of were left with not a lot of materials. I will say the former training that was mentioned before, back then I had asked to observe, because I thought, okay, someone should document this, because if it's successful, we want to replicate it. And I was specifically not allowed to. So those,
Who's organized the current modules and who's leading those discussions now?
The board chair.
Okay.
The office helped with research and putting some things together, and the board chair also did, and he led them whenever there was some topic that the office was better positioned to speak on, like the website and the various emails that we have and stuff like that. Then I would take over and talk the new members through that. And we're hoping to put together more written down things, and to have it be strong from a pedagogical point of view, and that it can always be updated. And when it's written down, then a lot of this stuff can be shared and other people can participate, like the vice chairs. I wonder whether putting it in the bylaws before we really have something that is fully developed and takes hold, I think it might be premature. Because this past year was the first year we really tried it. So we're gonna take some of this stuff and hopefully do it again next year.
So I have a
But,
question, Jesus.
Yes.
Was that, any of the modules online that we could look at to see how we're presenting it? You know, I have found in my experience in governing that mentoring programs are always the first thing that goes, unfortunately. You know,
Yeah.
we're enthusiastic one year and then we forget to do it the next year, or we haven't written it down. And I think it's very significant to have mentoring programs for the success of any new members, and even to use as refreshers for
Mhm.
people who have been on the board for a period of time. Because if you
Yeah.
haven't used something, that's really important.
Right. We do not have them online, but we made it a point to make recordings of the sessions that we did, should we want to go back and sort of study and learn. And we did. Kyle and I would have a little conference after the sessions. Okay, and he would say, okay, I think this went well, and I would say, we could probably improve on this thing. And so we do have recordings of them. We do not. We have not shared those online though, because they're not.
So
ready.
is it possible for the bylaws committee to see one or two of the recordings? Because
Sure.
we could structurally put it in without assigning it to anyone, but make a mentoring program as part of the orientation for new members and stuff. I think it's important and that's my opinion, I want to ask the other committee meetings, it's important for us to institutionalize the fact that we will do a mentoring program. I think what's the mentoring program can change over time. And I like the idea of modules. So I want to have anyone else's of the committee's thoughts on it.
Timo?
Yeah, I'm sorry if this might be taking us back. I actually had remembered this section to refer to the chair, sorry, the vice chair's mentoring and supporting the chair. I didn't realize that we were sticking in a whole mentoring thing in this section, which is what it sounds like we're doing. And if we are, then I think I would propose that we do it in like another section of this, because from my understanding or my memory, at least, this was like, how do the vice chair support the growth of the chair? So I don't know if anyone can clarify or anything like that, but if we're doing a whole other mentoring thing, I think we should have it in a separate section.
Okay, and there is something on board members that we could have something on, as opposed to a duty of a vice chair. I don't remember it the way you articulated it, but I'm willing to hear anyone else if they have any thoughts when we were debating this.
And Seligman is in the audience and requests the floor.
Anne, what's your thoughts?
So I'm so glad to hear about kind of the onboarding stuff that's being done for the new members. And I wasn't really aware of it. I'm not really sure if this is something we want in the bylaws, like how specific we want it, because, obviously if we had, like during Zoom, you're going to do something, during COVID, you're going to do something really different. One of the things that I would love is if there's some way, I don't know if it's a sort of, big brother, big sister thing that's maybe not formal mentoring, but just as an idea of, hey, you're paired with this person. If you have questions, you can reach out to them and they can help. That's not, it's kind of not for everything. It's not to replace the training, but just kind of somebody to, like you say, explain some of those things. I'm really, really concerned about the loss of institutional memory that's going to happen when a lot of people that have been on the board for a long time are term limited and leave. And so I think if we can, in the next few years, kind of do some of this partnering that might have happened naturally if we were meeting in person, but will not while we are in a Zoom world. So if there's some way that we can kind of support that, and whether it's even a bylaws question or just something, we should do as a board, but this seems like the place to mention it.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. And the buddy system is something that I'm very familiar with, you know, on giving someone a buddy to ask questions to. It works. So I'm hearing, just let me check with Adam and Sandra if they have any thoughts, because I was going to make a recommendation that we eliminate the whole thing about mentoring from the vice chairs, and that we spend some time sending a note to Kyle, because I think it would be good for all of us to know a little more about the mentoring program and to have more visibility to what took place. But I think there needs to be the commitment on the community board to have a mentoring program, or whether you do a buddy system or not. And I don't know how we want to, whether it's necessary to put it in the bylaws or it's just procedures. I don't know. Any other thoughts that, Sandra, that you may have?
Adam, did you want to?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say I don't have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other, I think there was kind of two components when we originally discussed this back in March, which was one, we wanted to solidify that there was a mentoring initiative somewhere. And two, I think there was some discussion or question about whether vice chairs had enough to do that was actually defined and not, you know, traditionally, I mean, we've had up to 5 vice chairs and for not good reason, right? And I think it is important. I mean, it's fine to have maybe a vice chair or two to be able to support and represent the board when the board chair is not able. You know, as vice chair, sometimes I have joined either the borough board or appear at in-person events or meetings to represent the board. But very much the vice chair role is very defined by the current chair and what they do or do not need support with or assistance with, I should say. So I'm fine either way of including it or not including it. I think it was just a concern that there wasn't enough clearly defined for the role of the vice chair and make it a little less nebulous. I think that one of the members had actually brought that up, and that's kind of why we had that there as a placeholder.
So I think I'm going to go back to what Seema was talking about and what you're talking about. And if we could just, without defining what the mentoring program is or any of the other stuff, if we could use language, and this is not concept, I'm giving you language, okay? So it would be under the vice chairs, and it would be support the chair in mentoring programs of new members. And that is supporting the chair. That talks about mentoring programs, but it doesn't tie our hands. I have to ask the committee if that is something that we could live with. That was sort of what Seema remembered. And I think this would do it for both the vice chairs. Anyone object on the committee? Do you see any hands, Sandra?
I don't see any objections. I was going to just say, to Seema's point, we do have the opposite situation where the current 2 vice chairs are prior board chairs, which I don't think has occurred in the past, at least that I can remember. Normally it's been like when I was first vice chair, maybe an aspiring to be chair one day. So I think we're kind of in a strange and unusual times and a pandemic.
Yeah, but we're in a strange and unusual times. That's why we should use institutional knowledge and memory, as I use your institutional knowledge on the bylaws, because you lived them so dramatically over the years. Okay, so if we could add where we say mentoring to support the chair in mentoring of new members, that would be how we would handle that. Jesus, can you put that in? I can't see what you're doing because I just can't, my eyes are not so wonderful.
I'll type in something now, or you're also doing that. Okay.
Oh, Sandra's doing it.
Or no, that's me. That's me typing on the screen too. Look at that. I'm in 2 places.
Sandra's doing it.
Okay. If we could go to the duties, I'm going to move us on. The duties of the secretary. Okay. And we had discussion when we were talking about the duties of the secretary to eliminate 4B. Okay. You see the note, it says strike. If you look at it, are there any objections to eliminating 4B? which says to supervise the maintenance of all information, orders, directives, minutes, formal communications, and other matters coming to the attention of the board. That has not been what the secretary has been doing. It's a massive undertaking, and really, we felt that we should eliminate that. You could see the word strike with a question mark. I just would like to get confirmation that we strike it.
Yeah, that works for me.
I agree too.
Maura, do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, Sandra, I don't think you object.
I don't disagree.
Okay, then we're striking that. Okay. Now, let me go on to okay, I am moving further to, I think we left, let me just see where we are. We're retaining, we agreed on the duties of the treasurer, that we're retaining the duties of the assistant treasurer. We had that as a discussion at our last meeting because of, unfortunately, what happened, that there was no one. Adam was elected to treasurer. I'm helping with the institutional memory. So if we're ever caught up in the situation where the treasurer leaves, you need to have someone that can be the backup. So we had spoken about, we had struck, if you look at the draft, we had struck the duties of the assistant treasurer. But my recommendation is that we bring that position back, and we certainly have done that this year. Anyone have any additional thoughts on that? Adam, especially you as coming into treasurer, any thoughts?
I'm fine with the recommendation.
Okay. Anyone object to us retaining it? I'm seeing no hands. Okay, we will retain it. Then, if you go to section 5, executive committees. And we said something when we were dealing with the executive committee that we wanted to include a section that the executive committee is open to the public, just to make that clear. I need to find section 5. I kind of lost it in the process. Okay, the executive committee. And so we talk about having an executive, it's in section 5, having the board shall have an executive committee composed of the chair of the other committees. The exec shall coordinate and facilitate the work of the board and its committees, advise the chair. It's a standing, but we don't say here, it says, shall we add, if you look at the thing that's underlined, it says, shall we add a statement indicating that the executive and all meetings are open to the public and that all votes are recorded and preserved by the office. So we raised the question of should we have a statement? I am proposing that we include a section on that. As we spoke about, anyone object or have any thoughts?
I just
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I just drafted a single sentence based on what you said, trying to, in the spirit of having things to reflect upon in front of us and not concepts as much as possible, which I'll be happy to read out loud if necessary. But
Yes,
Adam,
please
why
read,
don't you-
please read it out loud. Stuart, we're
very
actually taking your
rudimentary.
word.
Just very rudimentary. Meetings of the executive committee shall be open to the public and held in accordance with the New York State Open Meetings Law. I don't know if you want it to be more verbose, but if we just want to reaffirm that this is in fact, of course, the case.
I am actually okay with that. Anyone else have a comment or addition?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it as well. I guess my question is that wasn't it always subject to the open meetings law by default anyway, and then thus covered elsewhere? I mean, there's nothing wrong with just reaffirming it, but
So there are some sessions of the executive committee. I'm going to have Jesus.
yeah, executive session. Yeah.
Mhm.
Executive session. So it's not all meetings because you can go into executive session. So I think there's confusion, Adam, that I've seen when we've been in executive session, because that is not open to the public.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, then add an executive session blurb
Yep.
there.
Yep.
The thing with executive session, though, per the open meetings law, executive session can only be entered into within the context of a properly advertised public meeting.
Right.
So I guess I mean, obviously it's the committee's prerogative to include whatever language they're going to include or not include. I'm still a little bit unsure what prompted this, because all of the meetings are open to the public.
You're absolutely right. All meetings are open to the public, but I would imagine that it's very easy for someone to not understand the subtle nuance between executive committee and executive session, and that any of our meetings can go into executive session if they meet the criteria as per the law and the privacy regulation. So maybe calling it out specifically for new members or members of the public who are interested in better understanding how we function is not a bad idea. But you're right.
Actually, there was criticism that I had heard when we had gone into executive session. There was a lot of confusion about our ability to do it. So I think distinguishing the two would be good. And I don't know what language you would have, Sandra, to do that.
I'm thinking about that right now.
Okay. Anyone else want to talk the difference between executive session and executive committee meetings?
I don't want to talk about that. I just saw Anne's comment. Are there minutes to executive committee meetings?
There are minutes that are taken on executive committee meetings.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And Anne wrote, never mind. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Sandra, anything, or I'll move on?
I'm still trying to figure out how to word the executive session here.
Well, you can easily say that all executive committee meetings are open to the public except when the committee goes into executive session.
Right. But me, so when I read that out loud in my head, not really out loud, I guess, just in my head, I was trying not to read it out loud. The challenge I have is that the executive session concept isn't only for executive committee. And then I wonder if calling it out specifically here complicates the matter further, because then someone might say, well, I see there's a provision for executive session for the executive committee, but not for the board, which obviously, as we're ratifying personnel, employment, hiring kind of decisions, that has to be done by the board, not the executive committee. So I just want to make sure that we're not further digging ourselves into this hole.
Well, we could go back afterwards and we could, when we finish, and go look at the board meetings, and we can make reference to, the board can go into executive session because we do go into it for certain issues. So would that satisfy if we do it for the board meeting and the executive committee? Okay.
I'll go back to that as well.
Okay.
Maura Wong requests the floor.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Maura Wong requests the floor.
Okay, Maura.
Yep, this is a question because I'm new and I have not heard about executive session before. Can someone here just very quickly clarify the difference? And also, where would one be able to find language about executive session, if not in the bylaws?
Go ahead, Sandra. Go ahead.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I'll give an example. The open meetings law, and I'm going to send. I'll place the link to the open meetings law, the open meetings commission, the commission on the open meetings law. I forget what their wordy title is. Committee on Open Government. That's it. That actually maintains the law text for the state. Let's say we have an employee who is under review for acting inappropriately. Such personnel matters are covered under privacy and kind of the traditional HR concerns. However, we as a board that has to act in the public would also have to determine if like a firing or if some other disciplinary action was appropriate. And in those such cases, as an example, we would do so only amongst the board. We would not have the press or other people, watching, because that really is not giving the employee necessarily some due process.
Thank you.
It's used for very limited circumstances. It generally is personnel related and where you have the whole privacy issue. And certain things also, you would want the board to know about certain situations. So you go into that executive session. It's been very infrequent for the board, okay? And very infrequent for the executive committee. Although I have seen in the last, I guess, 3 years, when there was discussions about how you structured the executive committee itself, that we went into executive session to do that. So I think you're respecting someone else's rights when you go into that executive session. That's how I would view it, Nora. Oh, and the link, Sandra just provided the link to the open meetings law.
That
Does
has
that
the
help?
text as well as some case law summaries and
Yeah.
some practical application.
Maura, does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so you're working on language and we'll look at it at the next meeting. What we said for section 7, I want to go to that. And we were talking in section 7 whether we needed to talk that voting could be electronic, okay? Whether we needed to make that clarity, and I want to see where we had that issue. It was in board meeting procedures. Does anyone see when we dealt with voting? I wrote in my notes that we had a discussion that we had to talk about voting can be electronic. Does anyone remember that?
I'm not sure where that is. Let me look.
It is, I have it up on the screen right now. It is section 7B, voting. Voting at board meetings shall be, and you want to add, done electronically when feasible.
Yep. That was it. Thank you.
It's just if we were meeting in person in a hybrid model, or purely in person, let's say, does the board office feel like they would be able to execute an electronic ballot?
The electronic ballot that we use now, we could continue to use. My concern would be, would we be in a place that has good Wi-Fi? That is not always a guarantee. If everyone just uses their phones, for example, I've never actually tried to use the ballot on a mobile device. Would we be in a place that has cell phone reception? Because there were at times when we were in basements of this or that place, we wouldn't get good service. It would be nice if we could use the a digital ballot, but it would depend totally on where we would be holding the meeting.
Yeah, Jesus, I was thinking about that. I don't know how much longer we'll be dealing with, Zoom, for our meetings and stuff. But we need the statement. And I do think, I remember being at the NYU School of Dentistry and not being able to get anything on my iPhone and not being able to get into there. So you'd have to use paper there. But I think we should have the word electronic, and it just makes sense. And we never know what else could happen. that we may go back to electronic meetings, or how much longer we'll stay with electronic meetings. Okay. Okay, and the last,
SEMA requests the floor.
Seema?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, because I was secretary when we would do meetings in person at NYU, and I know I do remember, and you know, Jesus, if you might remember more, but I do remember we conducted electronic ballots even at that time in person. And from what I remember, everyone had either access to the Wi-Fi, so they didn't have to use like their own data in case someone pays, you know, if you don't have unlimited data or what have you. And I do remember that you could access the link.
I recall that we had electronic packets, but not ballots at that point.
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
we had about a dozen iPads that we had available when we were testing out being more paperless, and we would put the resos, the agenda, that stuff that would normally go in hard copy into your manila envelopes. We would put that on the iPads, but the paper ballot was still there. We didn't, that only came in the pandemic time.
The reason I think that is because I like have an active memory of like literally doing it on my phone, but we were all in person. So potentially there was like some hybrid thing that had happened where you could either do it on the phone or in person, but you obviously couldn't do both. But I do have an active memory of like us being able to go on our phones and vote if we wanted to when we were in person.
So I think we would have to see where the location is and see if that works. I'm not too sure if NYU is going to give us space, you know, again. So I think it's going to be an issue, but I don't think it hurts to put the word electronic in. That was the only thing that I wanted with this. Okay, if no objections, I'm going to move to the last item that we had, that we said we would come back to, and that's in item 8, okay? It's the committee members excuse policy, okay? And if you remember, we changed the policy, and I just want to confirm that that's what we want to continue to do. We changed, it's under C. It says a board member shall be properly excused from a meeting if the member notifies the chair of the meeting prior to the absence and the chair finds the reason to be of merit. And we eliminated all the other facts that was there, making it more the responsibility of the chair and the chair having the discussion with the committee member. We thought that was reasonable, and I don't know if anyone has any comments or second thoughts about it.
The only thing I would say, because the office takes a big hand in this, because we have to, after the morning after every meeting, we have to log attendance, we have to log votes, we have to do all of that stuff, because all of that stuff has to be kept on record per the Freedom of Information law. While this current policy, the current excuse protocol may not be ideal for everyone, it does seem fairly clear. And the only thing I would advise the committee to do is to get something that we all be very clear on what it is. If it is changed to what is being proposed, that to me says that if you do not inform the board before your absence, you are, regardless of whatever reason was the cause of your absence, you are absent. And then, you know, because that, if it says, you know, the board member should inform the chair prior. So that means that anything, sometimes the information comes after. That will not be allowed, and by my reading. And
well, I think your reading is correct. I think as a board member, we have an obligation, if it's a committee, to tell the chair and have that discussion prior, okay?
all right.
I think that becomes very significant because I think, as you know, the whole question of quorum and how you're functioning. And I think when you look at that, probably one of the biggest reasons that you'll have the discussion with the chair is you have a personal illness or an illness of a member of a family or something of that nature. And so in my mind, I was asking that you be notified before in order to be excused. You're exactly right. That puts responsibility on a community board member. And when we agree to serve, we do agree to be in attendance unless something happens. I don't know if anyone else is reading it any differently. You see any hands?
No, I see no hands.
Okay. So we're keeping it as it is. Okay. So those were all the items we had parked or items that had come up for discussion. Okay, what I plan, and I hope Jesus will have a couple of hours that he could give me, is I plan to set up a discussion with Jesus and go over it and produce a clean copy of the bylaws that we could go over at our next meeting, that it's clear, it won't have all the red and stuff, it will have the sentences. And at that point, as we go through all of it, I'd like to make sure that you all have an opportunity to read it before the meeting. No discussion, but discussion at the meeting. And then we will take a formal vote of the committee on the bylaws itself. And that would be the formal vote for it to be presented to the board. And if you look at the last article, I think it's next to the last article on how the presentation takes place. We presented at one board meeting, okay? We presented a written copy ahead of that board meeting, and it's adopted at the board meeting thereafter. So it involves two board meetings in order to have adoption of the bylaws. So anyone have any comment about that at all?
Just to clarify, what is required of me? I'm not sure I understood quite.
No, I would like to spend some time with you,
Okay.
Jesus, to clean up the document and do it as a total document that we could all look at without the reds, without the questions and stuff. So we have a good working document that everyone could read before our next meeting. So I'd like to set up some time with you because I can't do that on my computer. I'd have to come in and work with you.
Okay. Sure.
And we
Stuart
could do
has
that.
his hand raised.
I'm
also.
sorry.
Stuart has his hand raised.
Yeah, I don't know if that's from before. That's new. I just noticed that too.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Stuart Desser,
Okay.
excuse me.
Well, let me be Stuart before we go to you. Let me just see if anyone has any other questions.
There is a remark in the Q&A from Ann Seligman from the audience. There are CBs where committee chairs can't vote on resos in their committee and or in full board. Have you considered that possibility? Is her question.
I don't think
That's not something that's allowed, I believe. What board is that, Anne?
I don't understand what the whole question is.
So sometimes, so in certain bodies, the chair of a body does not have the ability to either participate in debate or vote unless they're a tiebreaker. I think that's what this is kind of implying. But I believe that my understanding and Corporation Council's understanding and a prior discussion around this matter from years ago was that all board members are in fact board members and have the right to vote on any matter. Yeah, I don't think that they can be abridged and only vote when there's a tiebreaker, to my understanding, unless that's somehow changed. That's why I'm very curious if Anne's saying that other boards do that, which ones that might be.
Yeah, actually, neither of them are in Manhattan. One of them is in the Bronx and one of them's in Queens. So,
okay.
I mean, it should still be the same laws, but I think the one of them, and I was talking to my friend who's on the board, was saying they feel like the committee chairs have a lot of power in setting agendas. And so they don't like it's sort of a way to keep them neutral in the committee, but then they can vote in full board.
So Ann, that doesn't keep them neutral in the committee. I could lobby a board member. I could lobby the whole,
Yeah.
if I'm a chair.
Absolutely. I thought it was really, an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you talked about it at all. I have
Yeah,
not been able to come to every meeting, so.
Yeah, we did not, and, I would say, thank you for bringing it up. I would say to you, a board member has the right to vote. If they have cause and they can, I would just
Yeah.
respect that they basically abstain for cause, okay?
Yeah,
And-
and
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say that I believe this actually came up specifically around what you just said. So years ago, I remember being in a conversation with attorneys at the borough president's office in downtown because we had an issue of abstention for not untitled or for cause. And the concern was that I believe previously there was a yes, no, abstain kind of category. And then there became an issue because people either were not clearly identifying that they were not entitled. And we also had kind of a tangential issue where people would just not vote on certain matters. And it became a question of if they're present, how come they weren't in the yes, no, abstain, or not entitled, to vote on the matter? And that became a matter before the attorneys. So it was kind of an inverse where they wanted all, being the ballots are public, they wanted all members to have an accountable vote.
And you have the ability to abstain for cause, which is a really important piece, and I've seen it used by people very appropriately. Okay, Stuart, I'm sorry, we took Ann's question. You had your hand up?
Yes, one important, maybe the most important issue that I think I raised in one of my emails is parliamentary procedure. We currently allow that somebody moves the previous question, someone seconds it, and then rather than vote on whether we'll end debate, we simply vote directly on the question. That means that any two people on our 50-member board can immediately close debate on an issue, and rather than a majority of the board. That's clearly not, that's certainly not the way Robert's rules work. And I'm not sure that's not even a violation of the charter, of the city charter, which requires a 50% vote. So is it clear what I've said?
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understood that.
So what we do right now is we're having a debate. Somebody moves, calls a previous question, someone else seconds it. At that point, we are supposed to vote on whether we will end debate and vote on the previous question. But what we do is we simply go straight to voting on the question. So two people can, one person moves and one person seconds to end debate. We end debate on the vote of those two people, and then we vote on the question. That's not parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I would agree with that. I don't know, and I'd have to maybe pay more close attention or watch the latest recordings. In the past, when there was a motion to stop debate, regardless of whether it was second, sometimes the chair would weigh in, especially if this was something that went on for 20 minutes on one particular item, unless there was an objection to stop debate that would overrule the chair. And I wonder if perhaps the current chair is just kind of jumping to I heard a second, I'm going to close debate unless anyone objects, therefore moving into the question, which you're right, there's kind of a skip of a vote there if not.
Right.
So I think also, to me, this had a lot to do with going on Zoom. Because when we were in person, we did have the particular votes on the debate, or closing the debate and stuff. But I do think, Stuart, you will see when we get the bylaws to the board members that we are emphasizing the need for a parliamentarian and the term of a parliamentarian. So that's one of the things that we actually put in the bylaws to deal with. But I
Yeah.
think it's also a device that has happened with Zoom. I've seen us cut short a number of things. And I think we need to actually have a discussion about it. But you are right as far as the parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like Zoom in many ways enables better and broader communication, but also makes it more difficult. I can't, have a quick sidebar with Adam as I would if we were sitting next to each other in an auditorium, or when I was chairing the board, I would often have someone who would act as a parliamentarian or the district manager immediately to my side, and I could ask a question if there was a question or an unknown like that. And I think now, it's always a very public comment or question, which makes it a little challenging, right?
Yeah.
So good point.
Okay. So
I understand that. I just, and maybe this doesn't belong in the bylaws. We just say that we follow parliamentary procedure, but the chair can simply say without objection.
Yeah,
and
I will reach out to Kyle, to make sure that at least he's aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
thank you. So
Thank
let
you.
me just ask, those are the things that we will be doing. I think you've heard the process. Let me just go to the committee members. Anyone have any last thoughts or comments before I ask other members from the board that are listening in for any thoughts and members? Any thoughts or from the committee members themselves?
None from me.
Okay, Adam, any thoughts?
None for me.
Okay, Maura?
None for me either.
Okay, Sandra?
No further for me. Thank you.
Okay, no further from me. And so, Jesus, do you see any of the CB6 members that are on the session that has any comments that they would like to make?
I see no hands raised, and as far as questions that were submitted in writing, they have either been addressed, they have all been addressed.
Okay,
Oh, now there's
Anne
another-
just raised her hand.
Anne just raised her hand.
She objected to that. No hands raised.
hi, Anne, what's your comment?
I just, I kind of re-looked back at a 3-page document that I wrote back in April, that when I did my deep dive into the bylaws, and I've attended a meeting or two since then, but I wouldn't mind, you guys are so dug into this. I'm wondering if I could kind of resend that, maybe Jesus send it to you and you could distribute to the committee, because I'd love it if you could just sort of be like, yeah, we I'm sure it will be a very affirming experience, because you will say yes, we looked at that. So, but if I could, that would be.
You're welcome to
Wouldn't I?
do that, but let me assure you and your other colleagues on the board, we went through all the comments that we received, item by item, and discussed them, and either decided that it was something we wanted to stay with existing language, or we made some modifications. So I want to assure you and the board that that was one of the first things that we did, was going through what everyone submitted, and people submitted comments at different times, and they were also contradictory at different times. People had different opinions, but we wanted to make sure, and that was our first couple of sessions, that we did all the comments. So Anne, you're welcome again to send them. I probably have it in my file because I've kept all the stuff, but no problem. Send it to Jesus.
All right, thanks guys. You guys always have interesting meetings.
Stephen
I'm sorry?
Shaw requests the floor.
I just wanted to second B's points because we did go through everyone's comments, and Anne, I actually specifically remember yours because they were related to the sections that I was addressing. We all had divided up all the sections. I actually remember all your comments and I remember them all being discussed. So just wanted to affirm that and second B's comments as well.
Yeah, I'll
Thank you,
third
Sina.
that. I don't know exactly which document she's referring to since she hasn't sent it yet, but I'm pretty sure we went through a slew of Anne comments, and I wanted to thank her also for sending those over.
Yeah, they were very thoughtful, as were the comments by many people. And the comments were different levels, depending on people's experience. And I think just to let everyone know, we did also a lot of research. We looked at what other boards had done in very specific areas. And we actually decided that the boards in Manhattan had the most stable and reasonable rules. If you look at the rules outside of the outer boroughs, a lot of them are on the fly or no specific rules. So it was very interesting to see what the community boards themselves have as rules. And that was something that we had asked the office to do and actually summarize some of the things that we looked at. So seeing nothing further, I'd like to see if there's a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. And let me thank everyone for the work that they did. This was hard. This was arduous. We came back. But I think, as you could see, we went through every sentence. We read the document. Each committee member had sections to deal with. And it was quite a journey. So I hope that we're on the final legs of the journey. And I think the meeting is adjourned at 8:11. Thank everyone very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam
Bye-bye.
Chair.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
New Year.